So thank you, of course, to the Gleschko Samuelson Foundation and the School of Social Sciences, Humanities, and Arts for funding this talk series. We're very happy to have our own Lilian Davila here today from the School of Engineering, who braved the elements and made it. So let's just a round of applause for making it through traffic in San Francisco. So again, it's a pleasure to introduce her. She has her PhD and Master's in Science from UC Davis. Just that. Is it as simple as that?
It could be.
She was oh, your computer just crashed.
I think
did I press that?
yeah. That's okay.
Sorry. We have a little more extra time. This is extra holiday break time for everybody. She's had several prestigious fellowships. She was a Ford Foundation Fellow. And I think before that, a UCOP President's Postdoctoral Fellow jointly between Lawrence Livermore Labs and UC Merced. She does very interesting work in material science, and she's going to talk to us today about using virtual reality and other visualization technologies to facilitate nanoscale research and education. So please join me in welcoming Lilian Davila.
First of all, thank you for the invitation. I apologize for a few minutes. I've been traveling a lot by car today, so never estimate the time you're on the road between San Francisco, Sacramento, and here. But I'm glad to make it to join you and to meet this group that I'm affiliated to, and I'm very happy and proud about that. While this is, let me see, answering to my prompt there, hopefully everything will come back to life soon. First of all, I'd like to get a sense of who's in the audience besides faculty. Well, how many faculty are there? Okay. Oh, Becky. And graduate students? Oh, good. Postdocs? Oh, good. Undergrads? Seniors want to be graduates. Okay. Well, thank you for coming. So I'll try to make this more of a conversation than a talk. Given we're getting close to the holidays, it's probably going to be more interesting. So please interrupt me as many times as you like. The title of my talk is right there. You have seen the abstract. It's essentially expanding nanoscience research. In my mind, there's not much difference between doing research and being an educator, because you're communicating to different audiences. And so I've always been interested in both, being a scientist, motivator, and mentor, and also an educator on the side. So I wanted to share some of the experiences in the first years at UC Merced in adapting some of these immersive environments that you may be familiar with for both effective visualization and learning. So, okay. So a little bit about who I am. I get questions, kind of same questions from both sides of engineering and non-engineering audiences. Why do you do the kind of things you do? And how is it related? So, I am a computational material science and engineering fellow, colleague, mentor, etc. My job is to study the connection between structure, properties, and applications, and hopefully, do a little bit of performance optimization of them. Usually, well, in the past I've used experiments and simulations, but most of my PhD and postdoc has been using molecular dynamic simulations, which are atomic scale, in that you're keeping track of thousands, and millions, actually in some cases, of atoms that represent a material structure. So I've been studying things like silica, glass, and zeolites, metals, and the like. We were interested in different types of properties, such as mechanical properties and other properties, because we were trying to understand how defects and structural transformations in these materials will lead to some consequences to changes in properties. So I started working on bulk materials and then on the structural properties of nanomaterials. I later on expanded to other types of materials, but most of the work that we do is computational. The neat thing about my group is that now we're doing both research and through experiments and simulations. So my grads and undergrads as well as postdocs have that unique opportunity to combine both, which is very valuable these days. So as you see in my research interest, I highlighted scientific visualization as well, and immersive environments because I've used it as postdoc. I use some of these tools to collaborate with computer science investigators who are trying to develop software for 3D type of visualization for scientific purposes. So that's who I am. And briefly on the area of computational material science, computational material science and engineering, or CMSE, it is a relatively young field that links the experimentalist with the computational side of things. We are interested in existing in new and advanced materials, their properties and applications. As you can imagine, this field is very interdisciplinary, and so it requires fundamental concepts from physics, chemistry, materials, engineering, statistics, and the like. So I'm trying to make it light so that you at least get a sense of that kind of world, and then I'll explain how the tools that I'm using from cognitive science fits perfectly there. So this is a mind mapping, if you will, of the types of computational methods out there that are commonly used to study materials, whether from engineers or physicists or others. So you have length scale on the x-axis, you have y-scale, time for y-scale, and so depending on the structure and the scale that you're interested, then you choose an appropriate toolbox, right? So an example of that is molecular dynamics. It's often used to study the nanoscale of materials. You can study things like mechanical properties and some other types of property. And then the results of that, you can actually, the results of those simulations, you can readily compare against experimental results from AFM and imaging through transmission electron microscopy, which is very helpful for structural comparisons. So this is an example of the types of tools that we use to study different materials. So as I was developing my research as a postdoc, I started testing some new software developed by a group called IDAV. I forgot what this stands for, but it's a computational group that develops software in environments to apply different software and applications for different fields like bioengineering, mechanical engineering, and the like. So this is a very outdated by now picture, but essentially showing that a lot of the computational simulations in the last decades have been driven by both hardware and software developments. It has quickly gone from the 1990s, this type of hardware, all the way to 2004, where you had supercomputers, and nowadays, obviously, we have even more powerful and small, and most importantly, efficient in terms of energy and cost. So the challenge to study nanoscale dimensions is that there's very limited data available from experiments. So you can find readily in the literature people fabricating, synthesizing nanomaterials, whether it's nanowires, nanoribbons, nano everything, nanorobots even. The problem is you can't really test those, as you can imagine, because those scales are so small. You need electron microscopy environments to be able to see them. So how do you conduct a mechanical testing on a nanowire? The simplest of all, right? You need to pull them apart or together, or to bend them or twist them in some form. Well, that cannot be done easily. So, that poses a lot of challenges in both equipment and also methodologies. There's not a standard for doing those things. So, both the development in hardware, software, the challenges of nanoscience really meet at some point, and that point is that we need to intertwine more experimental and simulation studies in order to be able to supplement, in some cases, predict and even guide experiments. Okay? So while I was collaborating with the group at UC Davis, and this is my colleague, Dr. Oliver Kralos, who I believe also collaborated with the power wall setup at UC Merced. So it was really neat. When I moved to the campus in 2009, I thought, wow, my collaborators already collaborating here, so that's really cool. So early on, we were using, I was part of the collaborators teams there. They have a huge amount of immersive environments, things like this, Merced and many others that is probably outdated by now. And they have a huge immersive facility, and so we were trying to both use and provide feedback on the usefulness of that software for material scientists. Because Dr. Kralos had developed a software, and he wanted to get input from a material scientist. And so I was using computer simulations from Livermore as a way to provide structures while I was actually analyzing those structures and having my own set of results from somewhere. It was a nice way of validating results. So you could easily create like a Lego with either goggles or some other input devices. You could create carbon nanotubes. In this case, it was a nice T formation of 2 carbon nanotubes. And immediately in 2009, a few months after I started my position here, Dr. Kralos actually transferred all of the capabilities from one of these immersive environments into a low-cost version of it. And I got very excited because it was just in time. At that time, it was just a visualization technique, but because I've used it in the context of the software and also my work, I knew it had a lot of potential. So I sought a graduate student from computer science who wanted to do material science research, and I hired a lab technician who was also a computer scientist from UC Davis. And we went to have several meetings with Dr. Kralos and say, I would like to reproduce your system, the low-cost system at UC Merced, and then expand it further to be able to do computer simulations as well. So now it would potentially become both a learning tool as well as a research tool. And now it changes everything, right? Because now, all of a sudden, this idea becomes more powerful because it's not just a matter of another nice visual for students to learn. So we put together the system and we started testing it, and it worked really nice. It took about a month to put it together, which is amazing. If you imagine that 3 people are putting together with no manuals, you have to buy 7 different tools from the stores, put it together, and we were the first group mimicking what Dr. Kralos had done, and then we wanted to go further. So this is the background of how did I get myself in this situation. And now it has proven to be a very, very useful research area that fosters both material scientists or computational material scientists and also cognitive type of work. Okay? So I'll briefly talk about these immersive technologies. So visualization, especially in material science, is a very challenging topic because we expect or we encourage the students to visualize a structure in 3D dimensions to our students, but we provide 2D pictures or text or anything, in the form of books and the like. So if you're not trained, if you're not trained as a spatially gifted person, as you may know, it's very hard to visualize directions and planes across a 3-dimensional structure, and all you do is try to draw a 2D picture of it. So often, material scientists use just, your stick and ball type of models to show here's the structure of quartz, and now if a deformation was happening across a direction 1, 1, 1, then this is the kind of motion and kind of defects that it will create along those lines. So if the students have a hard time visualizing that, well, the physical model is one good aid. But now if you are trying to explore other structures that we don't know much about, it becomes a little bit hard to be building those models all the time. So visualization is important also as they grow further into their academic career because they need to visualize things in 3D space, not only from the structural point of view, but because they need to learn microscopy, right? And microscopy is very related to the fundamental concept of structures in 3D space. So as we have, advancement of technologies and needs, I saw the ability to create some of these, integrate some of these tools and apply it since I've already first, oh no, I hope I did not. This is so sensitive. Okay, I'm not touching. Okay, so the idea is that, okay. So the idea is that I saw the opportunity to integrate various of these ideas in order to start something new here, since I had the opportunity to be in the right place in the right time with the right people. So the hypothesis was, if we set up an immersive environment such as this at Merced, that should enhance the learning, especially in the context of nanoscience research. So let me expand this a little bit more. So this is a schematic showing what I call the IDEAS project. The IDEAS project started in 2009, And it's a long acronym, but I just like the word ideas, so I'll explain to you the long story. It has to do with molecular dynamics. So it's, most importantly, I was trying to combine computational material science, computer science, material science, and cognitive science, right? In order to strengthen computational material science and the learning aspect of material science. So I created a pilot project, and we got some preliminary data that confirmed that the ideas virtual system was very successful in the learning process of roughly 10 undergrads that we did these different aspects of a project over a summer. Okay? And upon that, I submitted a NSF proposal, which was funded, and that allowed me to hire the graduate student to expand that system into molecular dynamics capabilities so that we can do research. Furthermore, the NSF funding allows some funding for a cognitive science student who was able to work on some other aspects of the learning, such as developing ebooks, so that we can train the students on how to use this system. Because obviously, if you have a 3D visualization system, you're not going to train with a tutorial and paper, because that obviously is not going to be suitable for it. And later on, we conducted another pilot project in 2012, and we used the ebooks with another set of students to get a sense of their, their feedback and response to that. In all cases, surveys were provided every week, and then we analyze, and we have plenty of data for any cognitive scientist who wants to join and to analyze further that data, because my two students graduated, and we have binders of data about these 2 summers. So most importantly, we have used the system into research. We have published papers specifically on the topic of, predicting molecular dynamics, predicting the mechanical properties of nanowires, nanohelices, and the like. And we have applied those learning tools, such as the ebooks, which are accessible to students with any ebook reader. So they don't have to buy anything or get anything fancy. So I should also mention that one of my collaborators in this great adventure is Professor Tini Matlack, who's here. So you'll hear her some of these results, and if anybody has any questions at the end, be happy to, from the perspective of our collaboration, we'll be happy to mention or answer any other questions you want. So this is the IDEAS project, or the IDEAS system. It used to be a project, it's a system. So it's a system made of several components. We have a specialized 72-inch display. We have sensors, we have infrared cameras, tracking computer, modeling computer. And this computer became a very important component of the IDEAS system, because we could have used any CPU, to be honest, but we were looking ahead and getting into a faster number crunching machine for the cost, and looking into like the next 3-4 years. So we used this video gaming machine, which in the beginning I was hesitant about that because I do not do any gaming. And we kept on creating this survey of the best machines for about the same cost of money. And this video machine called Alienware became became the best performance for the money as well. It was energy efficient. It was based on CUDA. So I was sort of putting a little bit of resistance there to my computer science team and say, no, let's look broadly. Let's look at these 10 parameters, and then Alienware came always on top. So I have to give up and just kept it facing this way so that I forget this is a gaming machine, because I was biased, to be honest. I was thinking, I want to start a new project. I don't want to have a gaming machine and the students are going to be like bringing popcorn to the lab, right? But it was the best machine, and I'm glad we have that conversation, and that I finally agreed to move on with that. At the bottom of this slide, you see some tracking devices. We use a Wiimote and some 3D goggles with tracking system. Obviously, there's many other types of inputs that you can use, gloves and many other newer ones, but that's the one that we use. So the pilot project back in 2009 involved this simple concept of how do we measure the effectiveness of these virtual environments for material science teaching. Well, we started with this concept of what if we teach the basic difference in carbon nanotube structures. There's 3 types of them, right? Depending on the chirality of them, the way you connect them. And essentially broke the 8 weeks in the summer into 3 parts. We conducted some basic teaching as if we're doing it in class with textbooks. Students had homework. They were given some tables and figures where they had to measure and identify the type of carbon nanotube they had. Then we conducted some surveys to get their experience, their feedback. Then the second part entailed building with the typical stick and ball models. We had 3 types: small, medium, and large, so that we can see which one is a little bit better in terms of handling those models. Some of them were pretty big, so we get a sense of what is more comfortable for the students. So this is showing a carbon nanotube, but it's also showing a cleavage that was done at the top, because the students were asked at some point during those exercises to imagine planes through those structures. And then finally, again, we conducted a survey after that, and then the third part involved creating the same structures, but now in the IDEA system, and compare their experiences. Are we talking about, is it easier than these? But is it better than that? How is it if you want to imagine directions along some plane? Okay, because again, for material scientists, that's important. So we conducted that study. We got lots of data. We actually requested the students to do their journal as well. So we have a lot of their own reflections. And it was pretty insightful, because one of the most important aspects of the finding is that, or the results, is that the students all felt like the virtual environment was a better, it was like a combination of the 2 previous ones, because it was easy to use, it was very intuitive, it was very easy to complete the tasks. However, anything entail this tedious building by hand of the stick and ball type. On the other hand, some of the students got a little dizzy because they're using goggles and the like. But if you gave the students enough time, they would actually thrive. So each team was made of 4 students. some of the students who were, I noticed they were a little bit more shy than others, seemed to need more time, so we gave them time, and then they thrived. The students who were very outgoing seemed to fly. They also happened to do a little bit of gaming, so maybe that also affects. So there was different aspects of how their confidence, how they were handling the task, and how they were communicating even between them came about. And so it was totally, it's another part of the results I wasn't expecting because I was looking at other aspects, but it was very interesting. So anyways, we have 3 sets of documented binders, regarding language, regarding visuals, regarding even schematics that they did. So it will be interesting to analyze further. So this slide is showing one of the students who's creating a carbon nanotube and the steps that normally take. She created a ring of carbons, a strip of carbons, then a plane. And then they twisted the plane. They lock some of the atoms around there. And then they start, like a zipper, start closing the structure to end up with single carbon nanotube. So the virtual environment, the ideas environment seemed to be promising. And of course, it brought up other consequences as well. Well, if some people get dizzy and other people are shy and groups of people matter, and how you deliver the exercise matters. It makes you think about, okay, this is a gadget, now how do we go about developing pedagogical materials that are adaptable, encouraging, maybe they become more self-reflective, maybe they're more active, and they take on the responsibility of their own learning, right? So many aspects like that came about. The first thing was, if I take this to a class or to a lab, first of all, I can't take the system to a lab, so I have to bring the students to a lab. And now I know, can I use more than 4 students at a time? Because it gets a little bit too crowded around it, and people don't have enough time to use the system. Then the other question was, well, can I bring some of these iPads to the lab or to the classroom, and maybe they remotely can use the system, right? Because my classes may end up having 20, 30 students. I'm not going to create too many sessions after class in order to have one person. Then the next question, obvious question comes about, how do you train the TA to teach in such environment, right? And so all these things come up and we say, well, let's look at how do we teach people how to use the system. So actually one of the cognitive talks from, I think 2010, I learned that there's many things in the area of audio visuals, audio books, or audio visual tools. And I was curious about it because, frankly, there was no reason why I would be familiar with it unless I was using it. So we started combining research from cognitive science on the learning with these tools and material science education. So we combined what was found thus far, and we ended up with the idea of, let's put together an ebook or a series of ebooks that will have the characteristics from both the best practices from cognitive science in this area, plus material science. So why those methods? Obviously, the audiovisuals would offer, hopefully, a more optimum learning technique. And additionally, we can teach others how to use the idea system. Among the advantages and limitations of these books is that, well, the advantages, you can pretty much have anything you want, things like animations, audios, have a familiar interface. You can have it to be as interactive as you like, right? There are many, many features that make it very interesting and adaptable. There's adjustment issues. You have to know your audience, your class, your group. If it's a summer program, you can conduct research. I have tested the system on kids as little as 7 years old, all the way to 80 years old. Their grandparents in preview days. So currently it's not remotely accessible and can be distracting, so you have to time it right as well. Okay? So the ebook development started by combining and reviewing the literature in these both worlds, material science and cognitive science. And the manuals, we aimed so that the manuals were easily creatable by my senior cognitive science students. I didn't want her to bother about learning any computer language or get herself sidetracked in the, in the coding of anything. So we wanted to be something that is very easily accessible. And so we created the ebooks and designed the ebooks with a commercial software and a Mac computer. The goal was to also design it so that the ebooks are accessible to all the students, regardless of what ebooks they have or ebook readers they have. And we exported these as EPUB universal formats so that they can be available in all platforms. So this is a pictorial schematic of the steps that we're taking for development, for the development of the ebook. Research, human-computer interaction. We strategize the design, collect all the necessary materials, edit material, images, text, video, etc. Created audio instruction files as well. Developed the ebook template using pages. The ebook template is actually, if you create, by the way, if you want to create something like that, don't create one just bare bones in pages. Look for templates that are already available on the website or in the internet. Otherwise, you spend a lot of time in other unnecessary editing. Then we exported the EPUB into the EPUB format, imported into an iPad, and then you can just easily use it. Next to the 3D system, connected, have it there. Students can learn it, use it while they're having all the gadgets. And so it has many, many benefits, including for students with disabilities, hearing impaired and the like. So there's a lot of great potential there. So this is an example of some of the pages and some of the features. So there are two different snapshots. I'm sorry if it's not too readable, but you can have your text with hyperlinks where the students can easily go and search for a definition. You can also have resources linked to that text, glossaries, videos. This is an actual video from the students creating their carbon nanotooth physical models. And then you can have annotations, audio, video, and many other things. So the students are learning, but they're also being very engaged in their process of learning. They're talking to each other in a very different way than if you just hand in paper or if you hand in physical models. They like physical models, but then after a while it gets kind of dull, right? The virtual environment is nice, But again, it doesn't last too long. It has the combination of both worlds. But the ebook seems to be a way for them to keep talking about it even after and before the class. So the gadgets, the 3D system, the ebooks are all nice, but now it opens up, a whole series of questions about how do we teach students in these environments? How do we engage them? How do we make them work in a group or independently in research, for example? So, these are some of the guiding principles that we identify. So, first of all, we aim to train the novice MSc students. So we're talking about sophomore or even younger, although most of the students in the pilot projects were sophomore or higher. We also avoid to try to overload too much information, right, in the use of unclear language. So we try to have exercises and homework assignments that are very clear. We have considered the large number of visuals, inductive and active learners in general. And finally, we will refine features and content over time, because every single time there is the same cohort of students are moving forward, their needs are different. Now, some of them want to conduct summer research in my group in combination with some other tools. So it's not just these tools. So the ebooks have to be adapted as well. So I hope I conveyed some of these features and some of these experiences and show you that spatial intelligence is very important in material science, especially in terms of visualizing materials in 3D space, in the context of learning about material structures, deformation of materials, and microscopy in the future or in the latter years. So the success of the ideas immersive system was proven back in 2009 as the students completed all their tasks in a successful way, comparing to the other methods. The visualization of the virtual environment was more engaging, and it gave them a higher sense of depth perception. And most importantly, they seem to completely be in charge of their learning style. They became more aware of what worked for them as individuals, and they seem to be more geared to work towards becoming more of a researcher in the sense of a typical researcher in the lab. The IDEAS project was expanded later on, around 2012, and we have conducted successfully large-scale molecular dynamic simulations, and now currently we're trying to implement finite element methods so that we can do other types of simulations that are very useful for us, but that basically cover larger length scales. And these audio-visual manuals have been very valuable to both recruit, retain, and encourage our students. Some of the successful stories in my group include a cognitive science student, Claudia Flores, who had gotten a very nice internship in Google X, as well as my master's student, Max Lardner, as well, and more recently, my PhD student, Miguel Diaz. So I have 3 students who are being sought by Google X, and I heard from one of the supervisors that the students are graduating with very unique skills because they're doing both experiment simulations and virtual reality in a very different way for, conducting their research and publishing papers and going to conferences. So they are very valuable, and they're doing very well, and they're happy, productive people, which is what we want. So, future work. We have obtained lots of feedback from undergrad students. I would love to collaborate with any cognitive scientists who want to go further into understanding how to develop pedagogical materials to teach students in the context of a class or a lab or things like that. We believe these type of tools and the way you conduct the teaching can strengthen the experience of the material science students. And we have expanded the research that we do. We have 3 other research tracks, but these has been very valuable in attracting and showing students there's other ways of conducting research nowadays. And obviously this has enhanced the recruitment and retention of our students, and because we show them that we are adapting modern techniques, and we are trying to also engage them early on in their own learning abilities and becoming more proactive and more self-reflective on the kind of students they are, so that they can become more, more effective in their future. So the idea is to empower them and not to necessarily make them, virtual experts. So I just want to acknowledge my collaborators. Claudia Flores was a very special senior undergrad who dropped by when we were doing, I think, Bobcat Day. We had a booth called Nanoscience Day, and she came along and she was curious about all the nano materials that we have, and she kept in touch. And then when time passed and I started developing these programs or project, she was very interested to join. And then we saw Tini, who was very open and supportive in this process. So I thank you, Tini, again. And it has been a very nice collaboration. I've learned a lot. I tried to become a better mentor and a better educator, and most importantly, a better coach for my students so that they can become their own self. And also I want to thank my research group and funding support for this project. Some of the references I'll be happy to show, and thank you for your attention, and hope that you have any questions.